Welcome to another episode of Management Muse. I'm your host, Cindi Baldi, and this is my husband and co-host, Geoffrey Tumlin.
Yellow! Welcome to the podcast where we try to inspire better work performance. Thanks for listening.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today on Management Muse. Today we wanted to announce that we're going to try a live stream coming up. It'll be on Cinco de Mayo, May 5th, 2025. So if you can, grab your margarita and we'll talk some management. Today we would like to ask you for a little bit of feedback. So to make that conversation interesting to you, we're looking for what is currently challenging you at work, either managing yourself or managing others. You can leave them down in the comments section, or you can check the show notes and we'll have a link to where you can leave us some of your ideas for that conversation. Now on to the show. Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today on Management Muse. I'm your host, Cindi Baldi, and this is my co-host, Geoffrey Tumlin.
Yellow!
And we are here today with Adam Willmann. He is CEO of Goodall-Witcher Healthcare.
Thank you for having me. I'm excied.
Delighted.
We are happy to have you here.
Yes.
He is here today to talk about basically organizational resilience, moving an organization through a crisis and the idea of going big instead of going small.
So tell us just a little bit about your approach to COVID. Talk us through that moment when you realized, kind of as CEO of a critical access hospital, that this is going to be bad.
Well, when it really was going to come down to be bad was when we had executive orders where we couldn't do our normal day-to-day business. And then we had to figure out who was essential and who was not essential and try to make sure that we did everything we could to protect, number one, our employees, because without them, we couldn't do anything. And really try to kind of manage where do we need to put people, how can we overcome some of the requirements or regulations and other considerations to do what we need to protect them. And then after that, we can move on to, okay, what do we do for our patients now that we got our employees safe? Then go to the patients, the community, et cetera.
Yeah.
So
It's kind of worked your way out.
pretty much.
Yeah.
Again, we can have all the patients in the world, but if you don't have a team to take care of them, you know, what's going to be left? And so we kind of worked our way that way. And that was actually after, you know, a little bit of cussing and discussing and holy crap, this is really going on. Yeah. What is the future going to look like? And in the beginning, you really thought it was just going to be for a short period of time or maybe 3-4 months and then we'll bounce back. But as we got through it, we realized that was not the case.
Yeah. The reason we wanted to do an episode with you is, as Cindi mentioned, in a crisis, there's a tendency to hunker down and kind of think, let me just get a core team together. We'll hammer this out. And it's kind of us against the world. The literature is very consistent for having a more resilient response. You should try to go against that tendency and think big. Think outside of the organization, into the community, into the state and beyond potentially, about how you can find allies to help you with whatever you're going through. Cindi and I felt like that's something that you did very well during COVID, and then we've seen you in other difficult situations, and you have a very good habit of going outside and looking for allies when times are tough. Is that something that you've always done?
Or did you learn that through some experiences?
You know, I think a little bit of both. I think as I've grown and gotten more experience, I realized that, you know, I'm not the only one. But I do think I was born with some of that, which is that team mentality. You know, going through school and then deciding to go into health administration. They always talk about good CEOs surround themselves with people smarter than they are. And so I've done that. But at the same time, it goes back to with my dad, don't reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
And so when you're a small organization, pretty much independent, we don't have multiple, hospital systems and, maybe people internally that deal with this on a day-to-day basis. So don't reinvent the wheel. Go back and see what other people are doing and then modify. So I think a lot of that has just been being preached to about don't reinvent the wheel. Or even as a graduate of Texas A&M, we talk about the Aggie Network. And so even through college with my alma mater, we are always pushed to build a network and then utilize them. And so that's always carried on with us. And, being a small rural hospital, we may not have all the resources within. And so having colleagues or understanding what the association can do, or even ask the questions is vital to making sure you're not missing something. Because sometimes even internally with your own team, sometimes we know what we know because that's all we know. And so if you don't reach out and get someone else's perspective or someone else's what they're doing to battle the same issue during that COVID crisis as a rural hospital, you may not find some of the best practices. And so a lot of it is just a team mentality versus, this us against the world mentality.
Well, I think that's actually a really good point, because we saw various places, like normally they're sort of in competition, but during COVID, it was like working together and getting, all the equipment that they needed, all the masks that they needed, and buying in bulk to benefit both places and then splitting it up. And so like, it's sort of, you have a good point with like in rural hospitals, you kind of tend to do that anyway. Like to some degree you are in competition, but like there's so much space between you and so much room for like, okay, you could specialize in this over here and we don't need to split that market.
Right.
We can specialize in something else over here that to some degree you are more of maybe we see more of we haven't studied this, but maybe we see more of a network among rural hospitals or other organizations that are set up like that, where, it's not so much competition. You really are relying on each other to learn from each other.
We are. And I would also venture to say during those stressful times, sometimes the only people that understand what you're going through is that colleague or is that network. Because, going to my parents or even my wife and trying to explain what I've done today or what I'm going through, they may not have that full understanding. But with your colleagues or with other people that are going through the same thing, they understand it. And you can also realize that you're not in the boat alone. And that's more important than anything, is knowing that you're not alone.
Yeah. Adam brings up a good point. Something that we've talked about before is there's this disconnect with a lot of times people will talk about work problems at home or home problems at work, but you're basically unburdening yourself on people who have no idea what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times part of us talking to other people about our problems is for the instrumental support, for them to actually give us ideas, not just the catharsis of talking. And so
I think most people think about talking in terms of getting information, but sometimes you're talking just because you want support.
Yes. And if you're doing that split where you're talking about work at home and home at work, you're unlikely to get the instrumental support.
Yeah, the informational.
Yeah, because they just don't know how to in this inside baseball.
You might also not really get the emotional support either because they don't actually understand what you're going through. It's kind of like when I saw you go through your PhD before I went through mine. And I know the difference in my mind with understanding what you went through on your own versus then going through it myself and understanding it at a completely different level. Like the idea that you would spend months writing a paper, that's a joke if you've never been through a PhD.
Right.
And so then it's like, well, shouldn't you be able to finish that in a night? Because that's like your experience in college, right? And then, so like I had a huge benefit from you having gone through it. You could actually understand it, but I was terrible for you because I was like, can't you write that up tonight?
hurry it up. Let's go. I got
What's the
dinner
problem?
plans.
Yeah, let's hit a movie.
What's
But
the
I
problem?
also think there's the other side of that is sometimes you get mental block because you're worried about the issues and stuff like that. And so it's almost like going to counseling. So it is sometimes getting something off of your chest
Yeah, sure.
to break down the mental block in order to come up with maybe different solutions together while you're both kind of just finally letting go some of that built up anxiety or frightness of what's happening.
Yeah, there's a book actually called This is Blue Ocean. And basically it's this idea of taking things from very distinct industries and how they do things and bringing them home. And it's really hard when you are sitting in the industry with all the practices that have just been the standard. And like you first search for solutions in your closest ring, which is what you were talking about, which makes sense why you would do that. But if you actually want to do something really innovative, you need to actually go into other industries and start searching for the solutions there, which is incredibly hard. But like the example is like,
If Disney ran your hospital,
right.
the book about that,
Yeah.
just bringing that. And I think that's where you can start internally and then for us going into our community because they're the ones utilizing our services. We know what the rules and regulations, red tape, paperwork, everything we need to do to stay compliant. But what is that from the patient's perspective or the community's perspective? And so then you kind of talk to them on their level and then, we need to maybe modify some of the things we're really doing from the internal, what we have to do to run a hospital and then move out to others, whether it is the community or other industries, maybe tailor that a little bit more so it's also conducive to meeting the needs of those individuals.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do think that is important. I think when you are trying to do something innovative, oftentimes the customer is just as locked into the institutions as you are.
Yes.
And so from an innovation, I know we're talking about resiliency, but from an innovation standpoint, I think they're only going to be good after you present them with the new option and they can try it out and be like, oh, that does work, or oh, that doesn't work. They're not good in leading the way on that.
Their fear of change, like most of us.
Or just not even thinking about it. It's just like a lot of this stuff just becomes taken for granted assumptions.
Right.
You know, like the idea of even having a waiting room like that. Honestly, this is one of the things that drives me crazy from COVID.
She talks about this all the time.
Like the idea of a waiting room where we gather everybody with their different sickness, that has to go down as one of our dumbest things that we've ever done as a society. And yet, like that is the expectation, right?
Right.
And so during COVID, I was so hopeful. I was like, maybe this means that we'll be able to do the phone and we can just wait in our car in our own private bubble and not get sick. But that's gone away.
And we kind of did that. I mean, we created a little COVID unit outside where people drove in and almost like if you're picking up your fast food, you had a QR code dial. Hey, I'm in, parking spot 6, and we'd go out there and do everything we can. But I mean, we still have.
But you brought it back. You and everybody else brought it back to the waiting room because that's actually the customers want that. Because
a waiting room is also a social atmosphere.
That's it.
It's still social, and you might see your neighbor. Oh, you got the same crud I got, and so now it goes back to what I was saying about using your network and going out for that is. You're not the only one sick.
Or this is how I got through it.
So
I know, but still from a germ perspective.
Well, I won't go to you when we talk about expanding waiting rooms and making them better.
She wants it to be like at a restaurant where you get a buzzer.
We've tried that and it did not work.
I know.
It did not work.
I get it. I do. I'm not criticizing that you went back because I saw it across the board. And I get it. People actually do want that social element. They want that element of community. And the hospital, especially rural hospitals, like that's where it's all at. Like you're the center of the community. You're where most people work.
Yeah.
You're where a ton of people, like this is how they have like these, random bonding moments with other people in the neighborhood. So I get it.
And it cures the element of curiosity of
Yeah,
what's
sure.
this person doing? Why are you here? And now you get to say, oh, you're here for you're not feeling well, or you have a flu. That's why I haven't seen you at church. Oh, I thought it was something else. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that can happen in a waiting room.
Yeah. So you're done with that.
Yeah.
I'm done.
That'll never. Yeah. She's been talking about that for 10 years.
I was so hopeful.
Yeah. So we talk sometimes about managers having a toolkit and having a lot of stuff in it. I find Adam to be good at using a lot of different kinds of tools and not always reaching for the same thing. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the points we want to make in this episode is when things get really bad, your tendency is to reflexively reach for the things that have worked best for you before, when that you may be in a very different situation and your old tools either won't work because the stakes are so high, or it's just not going to be enough.
Right.
And you're going to need more than before. One of the things that happened during COVID, this will be the last COVID story. And Adam's story is a lot bigger than COVID, but there was a time early in COVID when basically there were no nurses in Texas. Like a lot of nurses retired, a lot of nurses who were young were like, I didn't sign up for this. And a percentage of nurses went to New York and New Jersey to make quadruple the money. And so there was a time in Texas where there were no nurses. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but only slightly.
There was a big shortage.
Mm-hmm.
And Adam's decision, again, wasn't to hold onto his nurses. It was to actually go statewide. And I think it's fair to say, along with maybe John Henderson and the Texas Organization of Rural and Community Hospitals, Torch, that you, John, and a few others kind of raised the alarm at the state level. That's this idea of in tough times, go big. You could have just confined yourself to fixing Clifton, but you actually raised the alarm to try to fix the problem for the state. Is that fair? And why did you decide to do that?
I guess it kind of comes back to who's going to tell our story, or who can actually tell what's really going on. You know, whenever there's a crisis or COVID or whatever, you're getting maybe information out of a newspaper or off the news, or just the media itself. And so I think it's important to tell our story, or tell what's really happening, to help our leaders understand. They need to know too. And if we're not saying anything, they're not going to ever know that there was an issue.
Right.
And I think that's where having those state associations and working with them and helping them tell what's really happening and what do we need. We need somehow to get more nurses, because we're also seeing volumes across the state being admitted or into our organizations that we've never seen at given times. Yes, you have waves of flu or other illnesses throughout the time, but nothing like what we've seen. We've never really had issues of transferring people to higher levels of care when they needed it. Well, they're also bogged down. So there's something going on there too.
Yeah,
and
the whole network was...
You just have to tell what's really happening and try to just help them understand what is needed. Again, there's resources that we may not know of that the state of Texas did have and was able to help us with, finding nurses or helping us get contracted nurses into our state or into our hospitals to help us with our patients. And so it's really just kind of making sure everybody knows what's really happening at our organization. And then all of a sudden, oh, this is happening here, otherwhere. And then all of a sudden it kind of snowballs that it's not just a regional issue, it was a statewide issue.
So Geoff had said you have a lot of tools in your toolbox, and I do think that that's the case. But usually what happens in an unusual event is people like freeze in uncertainty. And yet your story and the things that you did indicate that you didn't freeze. And that was part of the reason why you were able to reach out. And so do you think that you have a pretty high tolerance for uncertainty?
Oh, that's a good question. I do think so. I mean, I think it's just being flexible. I mean, in rural CEO, and maybe every CEO, but for me, you never know what your day is going to be. Even pre-COVID, now, I go to work. I know a few things that I know, which is I'm going to take care of everything that kept me up at night that I know of as soon as I get to work. I'm going to take care of those emails that came in right at the end of the day that I didn't have the bandwidth to really think through, or things that came to me. And so I think a lot of it is yes, I have a tolerance for the uncertainty because my every day is uncertain. I know when my meetings are, but even those can be shifted if necessary, depending on what's going to happen or what comes up through the day. And so I think there is a little bit of tolerance for that. Maybe just a little bit more of that flexibility, just go with the flow and just take it as come, because what you think is a priority might be overshadowed by a bigger priority that takes you got to shift really quickly. And so I think that's what it comes from, or what I would think.
Or the skill, that how you develop the skill.
Yeah. And I think about when, who do you call? Where do you go? How big of a net you cast to go outside your organization. I don't know if there's like an internal tick, because after almost 15 years as a CEO in rural healthcare, you've experienced a lot. And I think that tolerance comes from allowing my managers, they have an issue. How are you going to solve it? I don't want to go in there and micromanage, tell them how to do it, maybe play devil's advocate on their solution at times. But when you start seeing the frustration of them that it's lingering on, or this issue has gone on for 3 months and we can't fix it, I don't know what, that's when, okay, I'll step in and let's see which other colleague or what resources are out there. Sometimes it's, you just don't know what resources are out there. So you just got to ask some questions. Hey, we got this issue. What, is there any help out there, or have y'all come across it? And then all of a sudden you get a contact, or you get, THA or Torch comes to you and says, hey, call this individual at the state or the feds, or they actually heard of a CEO that had that same issue and call them. And then you get your manager in touch with their manager, and you just try to build another tool in your experience.
It sounds like, from an uncertainty standpoint, it sounds like in some ways you're effectively using your network to try to reduce the uncertainty, because you're getting multiple perspectives.
What I think is important, though, to bring out is how widely diverse Adam's network is.
Yeah.
And if you're listening to this podcast, you don't have to be like Adam. He's 15 years a CEO.
And very personable.
And he, social butterfly.
Yeah.
And so you don't have to be like that. The literature does suggest that the longer you do something and the more expertise you gain, the more stress, anxiety, and probably uncertainty you can handle. But definitely stress and anxiety in that particular thing, because you can say, basically, been there, done that. Here's what I did, blah, blah.
Yeah, you can pull on the experience, and you've had time to build a network.
Yeah. Sometimes what you're doing, you have not seen like this, no matter how many years. I mean, you've been a CEO for more than a decade when COVID hit, but there's nothing like COVID.
Right.
And so Adam was very good at doing what in one of the most cited papers in psychology, Mark Granabetter wrote many years ago, The Strength of Weak Ties, which basically says that in your tight network, you already know what they know, because y'all are talking all the time. You're together, you're sharing everything. And so the people who actually make a difference when you need information are the people not in your close network, further out, who know things that you don't already know.
That you may be getting handed off to from your close ties, or you just may have just a casual acquaintance with them.
Yeah. You meet them at the bar and you're like, how's your day? And then you hear what they're going through. Oh, I'm going through the same thing. misery loves company. But at the end of the day, you can really kind of start talking, well, what have y'all thought about this? And so that's where I can see that. And you just never know where that's going to happen.
Yep.
It can happen at the library. It can happen at the bar or over the phone.
Yeah. Yeah. So we can build our resilience like a muscle. But some things that we're going to have to do, maybe for some of us, a little uncomfortable, of reaching out further, asking people outside of our close network when we need help. And another thing that doesn't get as much airtime, but Adam's been good at, and it's also in the science on this, is actually accepting that help.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get a connection with somebody at the state or somebody federal or somebody in Arkansas, you actually say, that's a good idea.
Well,
I should try that.
So on that note, I think what we see is a little bit like when you hire a housekeeper and then you run around the house trying to clean before the housekeeper comes over, where like most people's reaction to external help is, yes, I want it, but I don't want you to see my house dirty. And so they push you off.
You might have just hit my waiting room issue, like what I would gripe about. Like, why am I cleaning right now? We may or may not do that as we speak, but
like, your willingness to actually be seen in a less than perfect state. Like most people are cleaning the house before the housekeeper shows up. Yeah. And that's the same thing with the help. Like what we see is there's been help offered and they're like, well, I'm just not ready for it right now. Because like for whatever it is that they think that they have to get perfect.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Where they ought to just let them in.
Right. Yeah. Yes, I need help, but I'll take it later because I want to try to make it a little better. Well, actually, you need the help now. Take the help.
Through being a CEO, I've led the organizations that I've been over through change of ownership. We went from at Goodall-Witcher, we went from a PPS hospital to a critical access, and then change of ownership from an authority to a district after passing the district. I think what I have learned is change is inevitable. Yeah, and so.
Change can also be very good.
It is. And so a lot of times, I guess, accepting that help that is a good idea. I'm going to try that and try to get on board because we got to continue to change or we become obsolete. And so even in rural healthcare, if we're not going to change our ways, because when I first got to many organizations, when you're first there, that's not how we've always done it. It's the number one comeback on why haven't we tried something different? And so now working with my managers is like, try something new. As long as it doesn't impact us financially, real bad financial impact, or it doesn't take away from the quality of care, it only improves, or it doesn't harm our patients, why are we not trying something different?
Yeah.
And not everybody grasps that. Some people don't like change, as we well know, but sometimes it's just the way we have to do it. You can't keep, is that the definition of stupidity?
Sure.
Do the same thing every time. And I don't want to be
expecting a different outcome.
Yeah. And, but that also doesn't mean whatever you do might not be ahead of the time and it wasn't right at the time doesn't mean you should never go back either.
Oh, that's a very fine point. Yeah, there's a lot of that too.
Because there are things that we have done that may have been a little bit too progressive at the time. And then timing is everything. And so we go back and, hey, we tried this once, maybe now is the time. And sure enough,
considering that something that you tried wasn't just a bad idea. It was just that there were circumstances that made it not viable. Like I tell you this all the time about my brother. My brother actually, he's probably one of the best visionaries that I know. Like he sees trends. And as a consequence of it, like so I grew up in a movie theater. I grew up in a drive-in movie theater. I remember when my brother tried fried chicken at the drive-in and nobody wanted it. Oh. They only wanted the hamburgers and the hot dogs. But then like 5 years later, McDonald's is rolling out chicken and then it's the craze. And he was just too far ahead.
Right.
And so then we eventually rolled out chicken, and it was like a number one seller for us. But like, you got to get the sentiment right. He saw it coming, but because he was so good at it, he saw it too early.
Too early. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to be ready also when the time is right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We worked, it's been a number of years, but we worked for years ago, a human trafficking organization before anybody knew what it was. They thought it was about streets, like congestion, like traffic, right?
That's like people who think that my degree in organizational behavior, I'll tell people this, and this has happened in multiple locations. I'll be like, oh, it's organizational behavior. And they'll go, oh, you can come and organize my closets.
Oh.
And I'm like, note to self, must say management.
Yeah, but this organization, then the moment came, and human trafficking was on everybody's radar, and they weren't able to capitalize on that. That another organization was able to basically spin up faster,
right,
and took over for the area. And they basically eventually became a part of the other organization when they were older, more experienced, and should have been
in a position to take advantage of it.
Yeah.
Hello, Musers. Now it's time for commercial break.
All right, gang. We're here to ring the cash register, and we have our main man, Adam Willmann, CEO of Goodall-Witcher Healthcare. He's going to talk just a little bit about our comprehensive organizational development package, where we do classes, coaching, consulting, and Cindy's organizational survey. Tell them a little bit about Goodall-Witcher's experience with the organizational development program.
We've really enjoyed working with both of y'all, and we've seen a lot of success through the few years that we have been working with y'all. And each aspect is important. The executive leadership, manager leadership, even our employee engagement survey, and the employees sessions, all of that is necessary to get the success that we've had. And so there's not one aspect of what y'all do is more important or has generated higher returns than the other.
Yeah.
Aww.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's
You're
so
very
sweet.
There's your
We
commercial.
appreciate that.
There you go.
Yeah, we do
Testimony.
appreciate that.
I'll just sign the whole meal deal. But I really do feel that way because it's helped the C-suite, it's helped the managers build the resilience they need. It even has helped employees build resilience and a little bit more understanding of things that they can and cannot control. And then also just having that anonymous feedback of how we're doing and what we're doing from the survey is all been a part of what we needed to happen in our organization. It's just more tools that bring back the information so that we can make changes to what we do day to day to be successful. Those services have been impeccable for us to grow as an organization. And I believe if you look at the survey, what we're doing with y'all, the survey shows that it has grown and improved year after year, which is what we want to do.
Thank you. You're very kind. If you want to help your organization get better, give us a call. ondemandleadership.com, ondemandleadership.com. We know what to do to help you find another gear. It sounds like sometimes we talk about this, you have to get everything right. That's not strictly true. And you're going to get a lot of experiences and a lot of options. So you get a lot of reps. Mm-hmm. So you don't have to get everything right now, because in 2 weeks, you're going to get another set of options. But Adam's point, Cindy's point, and put them all together is a good one. Sometimes you're ahead.
And you're too far ahead.
And you need to stop.
Yeah, sometimes that first mover advantage doesn't actually exist.
Yeah, so you need to stop, come back, and wait, and then you make it another better shot. The opposite, or the correlate, is also true, that when the moment is there, you have to be ready. Mm-hmm. Or else other organizations may take that moment from you.
Right.
Well, and I think that although we haven't gotten into like the fine details of this, I think that some of the readiness is actually linked to the external support that you generate, because like one tiny organization isn't going to change how the state sees rural Texas unless you've been working a lot of external points to get them on the same page as you. And then they basically change something structurally to move rural health in that direction. Like you actually need that external support that you've identified as sort of unique, or that is a need. And then when you get the actual external support doing it, then you can do it. But like you and Clifton doing something new that the state isn't supporting in whatever various ways they support, well, nobody's going to know about that. But as soon as the state is like, hey, that's a good idea, and we need to drive that through all rural hospitals, and you're the first because you basically have been setting the groundwork and you've shaped the story, then you have a big advantage.
I agree.
I want you to tell the story because I think it relates to a lot of this about changing your phone system.
Oh, and that's one of those things of being progressive. Maybe the time was not right, but we've had a lot of growth at Goodall-Witcher, and with growth, more phone calls. And so we're sitting here thinking, okay, we can't keep hiring individuals to answer the phone. You know, you can only answer one phone call. One person can answer one phone call at a time.
Yeah.
And so we try to digitize our phone system, which 80% of all corporate America has,
Yes.
Call tree, press 0. And we tried rolling that out, and it did not go over very well. There was a lot of reasons, and maybe the rollout wasn't the best. We learned from that. But at the same time, that's not what our community wanted. They wanted someone to answer and help them, get me to where I need to be. Don't make me to choose 1, 2, 3, 4, or 0 for operator. Let's just go on. And so we had to scrap that, go back to the old way, or modify the old way a little bit, end up hiring another individual to help us with phone calls. But we ended up still getting a new phone system that gave us some more tools to help us with that and get people where they need to be. And so, yeah, that's one of those things where our community and our organization, for the most part, wasn't ready to go all digital into phone call answering. And so that's when we knew, okay, we got to do this over. We got to go back and see where it goes. And that's one of those things where maybe it didn't work then, but I'm not going to say that we won't try it in the future, especially if we continue the way we are. We're going to have some help.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a good example of being willing to reverse your decision.
Oh, and it was a very public decision and a very public reversal. Yeah. But that's going out to external stakeholders, both patients, our community, and really listening to them and saying, hey, this isn't working. So then you get on the phone. Who else has had this issue? Where else? What did y'all do? And we were able to find some solutions and still have some digitized where we're now more on. We do have a lot of people stop calling us because they were trying to make appointments. Now we have the option of them making appointments online. So it wasn't completely scrapped.
That's a good share of volume.
It was. I mean, we're seeing over 3,500 people in our clinic on average, which is up greatly over the last 4 years, probably about 40 to 50% increase in volume. Yeah. And so if we can move some of those individuals away from having to call, be online, be on hold, they can just go online and schedule. It reduces the amount of calls.
Yeah. 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 It's a good example of, and a good reminder of being willing to stop and say, we hear you. We're going to change it. Even when, like, sitting around this table, this conversation, what strikes me is you were actually right. Like, it should be digitized.
Yep.
But being right isn't the most important thing. It's right for the moment.
It's right logically. It's not right emotionally.
Yeah. Yeah. And in this instance, Adam saved some of his political capital, so to speak, for another day. I'm going to give you what you want. You want to be able to call, have a human being, and get connected. I'll circle back to this in 5 to 7 years.
Yeah.
We'll hire another person. I may need to draw on this goodwill. I'm not going to burn it here.
Yes. And I think in the end, you have to have patience. You have to have people who support you that are coming in. And if they're going somewhere else because it's easier or meets their needs, then what are we there for? We're there for the community to keep them well. We're there for our patients to get them feeling better. And so we have to balance what is right to what is needed or what those external stakeholders want. I mean, in 2018, when we saw that there were going to be changes in supplemental payments and other funding mechanisms, we drew on some of that political capital to pass a hospital district. So in Bosque County, we had to go out and ask our citizens if they would tax themselves to support their healthcare organization. They could have voted no, but 58% said, y'all are vital. We think y'all are doing the right job. You're very transparent. You're open. We support this and it is a must. So absolutely. And so when you have that goes back to just utilizing when you need help.
Yeah.
You got to lay it all out. So I think you made that comment earlier, when things aren't going right, you kind of stay in because you want to clean your house before the cleaner gets there because you don't want people to see how messy. Well, when you do that, you're hiding the true fact. And then are you transparent? Are you being open and honest? This is not what it seems. How can I believe you? And so you have to be a little bit, less guarded in your ways.
You have to be willing to be vulnerable.
You do. You have to be a human and be approachable. And that's what I love about where I'm at and in rural healthcare is, I get hit up in the grocery store, at restaurants, I'm always there to tell the story the way it is. Making it too clean just doesn't paint what really is going on. And then when you need help, how did it go from everything's great one day to now you need help tomorrow? People aren't going to trust that all of a sudden. And so you got to build that trust.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
a good point.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I've also have thought a lot about with my network. It's not always about calling them when you need help. It's more important to answer the call when someone else is calling.
Yeah.
And so a network, no matter what it is, whether it's state associations, you only get out of it what you put in. So if you're just paying dues, that's all you're ever going to get out of it. But if you're engaged and helping them when they're in a time of need, whether you want to call it political capital, pay it forward, whatever, you have to be willing to do that. And so when I have colleagues call and say, hey, I had this issue. Have you ever had it? No, I haven't had that, but I've had this. This is what we've done. This is what I got from other people. It's starting to build, that network. So when I call, they do answer.
Yeah.
And that's as important as knowing when to go to your network or your connections to get help that you need. Because if you're always taking and never give, that core people helping is just going to continue to get smaller. So I think that's a good point. Whether we talk about political capital or making modifications, you got to accept the help, but you also have to give help when you're asked.
Yeah.
What would be your advice? How would you translate this for managers in their positions today?
I think the advice is just being vulnerable and being honest. Maybe start before you need it. So like anytime we hire a new manager, the first thing I say is, hey, why don't we get you a hold of the manager of the like position at another hospital? Give them someone else that's doing that. And so
smart.
I always tell my managers, and a lot of times after they've been with me for a while, now they know, well, I have already called XYZ. This is what they've done. I don't know if that's right. And so, well, have you tried it? What makes you scared? And have that conversation. So it's really trying to make them feel empowered that it's okay to go outside the organization and get some of that education or advice from a colleague. And so it's not just at my level, it's every level in the organization talk about, because a lot of us may not be going through the same issue at the same time, but we've all been through some type of issue that's like, and so learn from it. And so it's really not closing down and being guarded because we're, this organization. It's going ahead and pushing them out to see what they can do. Oh, you need to go have lunch with them. Y'all meet up, go have lunch, build their network. So that way my network, that's really, I think, what has helped my network expand is by having other, managers already building that. And I think that's important. Get started early. So when it does happen and you need someone, you already have it. You're not starting with square one.
Yeah, you're not searching for the people and you actually have goodwill built.
Right. Yeah. You have that relationship and a little bit of trust formed already. So that way it's easier for them to answer the call or vice versa. And it's easier for them to call us at the same time.
Yeah. I have always thought about it in terms of within the organization, making sure that, you're actually building relationships with the other managers and above. But that's actually something I don't think I've ever heard anybody mention,
smart.
Where as part of your, essentially as part of your onboarding,
Smart.
that you're helping them identify who's in their position elsewhere and helping them form that relationship. And I think that's actually really a very good point.
I've had some managers, and I think a lot of times people are worried about forming that relationship because, they're going to poach this employee off. Our employees are going to leave us and go there because it's better. Because
you got other problems.
Our culture is what our culture is. Y'all have been helping us really exceed our culture with y'all's consulting, and so you got to feel confident in your organization. If someone wants to leave you, it's not just because they have a network or something else is going on. There's probably more issues within the culture of your organization is why they're leaving. There's lots of studies that y'all could probably quote way better than me about people leaving. And so I don't fear that. If that's a better fit for them, then that's a better fit for everyone. And so make those connections and boost them up. It makes our organization better by having networks and connections, and you don't waste time in stressing out on things that may have failed elsewhere or may not even be a solution. Let's start with that and go from there.
Yeah. This idea, it's a small one, but it's back to the big point of this discussion on organizational resilience. Most brand new managers are just like, what can I need to get this job right. And they're
so afraid
narrow.
of failing.
Right. And that's normal, but we want to go against that. Well, why don't you pick up the phone and call our competitor? If you're the new lab manager, why don't you call the lab manager of this hospital 45 minutes from us? And
it's also potentially, it feels like a safer way to go big, right? Like if you go big inside the organization with your colleagues, like there's a little bit of like face loss that happens, right? Like you feel like, well, I'm admitting to my coworkers, I don't know how to do something, but somebody external doesn't actually impact your job. I mean, that's what we do, right? Like that's why our coaching is very beneficial, because like you can tell us anything and it doesn't go anywhere, and we're going to try to just help you figure it out. There's no negative outcome to your job.
Right.
And that's what you're getting with going external with like a person who is your peer. Like they don't impact your actual job. You just get to admit you don't know how to do something, and you get to save face and hopefully get better information. So I do think it's really a very
never thought of it that way.
Yeah, it's important for helping people feel like they're not alone. Because what usually happens is you call somebody else. We have visibility on this because we have an unusual job where we're gathering people from across the organization, and they'll get together, and they don't have a chance to get together that often, but they'll find they're struggling with the same things.
Mm-hmm.
you feel like when you're in a crisis or you're climbing up a learning curve, you feel like you're the loneliest person in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But you gather 2 or 3 people who've been through it or going through it, and you'll find out how much is actually similar.
And yeah, you might still not have any solutions for it. It sure does feel a whole lot better to know that, like, okay, it's not that I'm failing. It's not that I'm missing something obvious. Nobody's got this thing figured out.
Yeah.
Well, there's always been kind of a saying, sometimes a feeling where rural healthcare or rural organizations feel like they're on an island. Mm-hmm. And that's that loneliness or, and so we're not on an island. We're just creating our own island. And so we got to break that. And the best way of doing it is just pick up the phone and vent or talk or discuss or do whatever you need to do to realize that you're not on an island. You're in a big area.
There are a ton of rural hospitals.
There are.
Yeah. It reminds me of the story of Adam Willmann when he went from Boeing to Ford, and he became the CEO of Ford a number of years ago when Ford was struggling. So the board's like, hey, you need to turn the company around. And he would have his weekly meeting with his managers. And basically they were all like, yep, we're good. Green light, everything green light, green light. And Mullally sitting there, and he's an outsider from an airliner, Boeing, coming to cars. The board said, you have to turn around. Things aren't going well. And all of his leaders are telling him this everything's great. And so after about 2 meetings like this, in the third meeting, he starts the meeting and he says, here's the format I want us to use. I want you to tell people who you are and what you do here, and then tell them what help you need. And he says, I'll start. My name is Adam Willmann. I'm the CEO of Ford. The help I need is I'm supposed to turn around this company, but everybody's telling me things are great. Will you please help me figure out how we're going to turn this company around? And that honesty, as you mentioned before, it started the habit of people being willing to ask for help and say what they need. And in that third meeting, the first time he did that, the next person who spoke says, I'm Ford's European division head. The help I need is China is killing our market, and I don't know how to stop it. And there was somebody from Mexico who's like, wait, I have an idea. We had the same problem in the Mexico division 2 years ago. And so then Mullally was able to start stepping back and begin figuring out, all right, where's the priority for what we fix now that some of these issues are being brought more honestly to the table?
I think that's something that I wish I would have known a lot sooner in my career is those 3 words. I don't know.
Yeah.
They're really hard.
It's really hard, especially when you're hired. For me, my first job, I think I was a CEO at the age of 27, 28.
Wow.
Of a rural facility.
Right. So you're determined to know.
I got to know everything.
Everybody's saying you're so young.
We hired you to do this job. You should know everything about it. And so now I know my job is not to know everything about it. My job is, if I don't know, I have to know someone who can help. And I think that goes back to building that external network of whatever stakeholders it may be, is because I can't know everything. If I knew everything, then I probably should, have a portrait of myself in a museum by now. But I don't know everything.
Those people didn't know everything either.
Exactly. What they knew is who was the best artist of the time to paint the portrait. And so that's what I think a lot of my job as a CEO is, not to know how to fix, how to solve, how to do. It's listen a little bit and be like, hey, I think I know who we should call. And if I don't know who I should call, you could just call someone else. And it's the, 7 degrees to Kevin Bacon. Sooner or later, you're going to get to Kevin Bacon.
Yeah.
I've never called him. I haven't gone that far into it. But I think that's what I wish I would have known a lot sooner is I don't have to do everything. I don't have to know everything. I don't have to know that. Even as a new manager in a position or a new CEO, new anything, even with my board, they'll ask questions and I will tell them, I really don't know that answer, but I'll get it to them. And then I follow up with the board in an email. And that just builds even more trust. Like if you're willing to admit that you don't know, but you have someone that might know, let me call them, or here's my hunch, but I really need to clarify that. I think that would go a lot further. And it helps you get through those tough times faster when you finally admit that you don't know and you start finding people that may.
Yeah. It's a good point. It reminds me of the research by Adam Grant about how when people don't know you, you have to be careful of disclosing that you don't know too early.
Yeah, when they don't know that you're competent, when they're new to you and they haven't established your competency, you have to be a little careful. But once you've established your competency, then it's actually massively beneficial to be vulnerable because then they can reciprocate. Also, they see it's safe to say that, and then they'll reciprocate the vulnerability.
Yeah, so we don't recommend in a job interview, because of this research, we don't recommend in a job interview a lot of I don't knows.
Right.
And I have no idea. And I'm really bad at that. But once people know you can do your job, that's usually, as Cindi said, it helps with the reciprocal nature of people being willing to say that they can.
It's part of psychological safety. It's part of creating an environment where people don't feel like their next step might be their last.
Right.
Or, so.
Well, even with my managers, when we hire a new one, I would say my management style, I'm not a micromanager. I hired you to do a job and I want you to do it. I'm not going to be in there every day or, how's everything going? What do you need help with? But what I tell them is my door's always open. And if you need help, just ask. But I'm not going to go ask you if you need help because I don't know what you don't know. Only you know what you don't know. And your job is to come tell me, hey, I don't know what I need to do, or this is what I think. If you don't know, at least have somewhat of a solution, a discussion point that we can talk about. But I don't want to be a micromanager, because at the end of the day, if I hired you, if I have to do your job, why did I hire you to do the job I could already do? And so a lot of that is just creating that culture of, it's okay, because if you can't figure out that you don't know fast enough, the issue that's happening could grow way too big where it's unchangeable at that point. And so, let's try things, let's fail. If we need to go out, that's when we start figuring out when's the right time to start, going outside. I still want to trust, and I do trust my managers to take care of whatever we need to internally. But there comes a point to, okay, you're frustrated. This isn't working. Why do you think it's not working? Let's call someone else. Let's call the Ghostbusters and see if they can't come help us bust this.
Well, and I think also you don't want to intentionally make people frustrated in their jobs, but to some degree, if the frustration is coming from basically you're moving so fast and growing in a positive way, and they're just having a little bit of trouble keeping up, well, that's actually not a bad frustration. Like, yes, we have to help them so that way they maintain this feeling that they can meet the moment. But many people have a desire for learning and growth. Not everybody, but many people. And for those people, to have to just do the same thing over and over again and not have a little bit of challenge to their job, that isn't going to be a long-term thing that they're going to want to do. And so having that challenge actually is probably healthy. It's just you're walking that fine line between challenge and frustration.
Right. I had a colleague that is near and dear, and she taught me that a CEO's job is to push people to a point of uncomfortability. And that's that challenge them. If they're comfortable, they may not be, you get complacent when you're comfortable. And so it's our job to kind of push people to a little bit of this level of uncomfortability, to be challenged, to get that worthwhile, job is when you meet challenges and you can solve them. And so then you just grow them into confidence at that point. So I really kind of like that.
I like that too. I think of it a little bit differently. Like if you are moving them to the point of being a little bit uncomfortable, like basically their world is opening more.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of, you can be comfortable and like your world kind of stays stable, or you can step back from the things that are making you uncomfortable and your world shrinks. If you get used to just living a little bit uncomfortable in certain areas, maybe not all at once, but like taking a little bit of discomfort in the doses that you can handle, you can handle, it's just uncomfortable, then actually your world continues to expand.
And that's where you have more resilience to those biggest issues, is if you're taking those smaller doses when the world's not shutting down or major change or major issues happening. If you're just pushing them and growing while you can in those small doses, you build that resilience when things really true hit the fan.
You know that you can change.
Because you know you can grow, you can change, and you have more confidence. It's the small wins lead up to the big win. And so that you just get a lot of those small wins start getting you more confident in your skills. And then that just kind of builds when you really don't know. It's like, I'm okay with this. We'll figure it out. And then you go figure it out.
Yeah, we call that self-efficacy in the literature. That's what that would be called. Like you are getting small wins, and as you have the small wins on this particular thing, you build a sense of self-efficacy. But in a way, it's not just building self-efficacy in the particular skill or job that you're doing. It's building self-efficacy actually in handling uncertainty and change. And we as human beings are not very good at uncertainty and change. And so to recognize that you actually have all these times that you've lived in that uncomfortable lane and been good at it, in a way, that's also a way of you going, I'm actually good with uncertainty.
Mm-hmm. And you get that mindset of, this is just another day. We've done it before. We'll see ourselves through. It just will be a little uncomfortable and it might be painful in times. But uncertainty shouldn't be where you just close down. That's when, and that just kind of then leads into more people calling you calling them. And then it's just a big global, or I guess for me, more of a state association really just kind of brings us together. And, I'm not the only one out there, and you recognize that.
What other advice or wisdom do you want to share with our audience of managers?
Do we have that much time?
Yeah.
I think that saying I don't know, but trying to find a solution is important, or at least developing. Because I think with managing, I think what I've learned a lot about being a leader or manager is really growing confidence, but also being a problem solver. Most of all these problems we have to solve. We can't just shove them under the rug. And so, just feeling a little bit confident in it, but work on a solution, problem solve. Sometimes with my wife and I, I'm a problem solver. She comes home, she tells me what happened with the kids at school. Well, I'm solving that problem. No, now we've developed where, Adam, I don't need a solution. I need you to listen. And so because of what my wife has taught me through that's what I tell managers. If you just need to talk, you got to lead off. Adam, I need you to listen. I just
need to vent.
Because I'm going to go to my comfort, which is let's solve this issue. But it's not mine to solve, and nor do they want me to solve it. They just want me to listen to them. And, then they may say, hey, do you have some a little advice, or what do you think?
Maybe they do.
Most of the time they don't. They just want to be heard. Sure. And so, being good at solving problems and not running away from them would be another good attribute. What we look for is, not every solution has to be a home run. Maybe little bitty parts of it was good. Maybe the majority was bad. Hence, digital telephone in our organization. But we took what was good and made it, and took what didn't quite work and take it away. And that's also just having that self-reflection is not everything I'm going to do is a home run. And once you kind of understand that, it makes your job a lot easier.
The purpose of this episode is to expose you to the thinking of someone who does something that we should do, go big, think broadly.
When in order to protect ourselves, our inclination would actually be to go small.
Yeah.
And sort of hide a little bit.
Hunker down.
Hunker down.
Yeah. If you don't take anything else away, remember that.
Go big.
Yeah. Don't hunker down. Look for resources, use your network, accept support when your department, when your team, when your organization is in need. And now, to give our thanks.
Well, thank you for Adam, because he came and he has tolerated us today.
He came, he talked, he conquered.
Yep.
It's been a blast. I enjoyed this.
That's
Hopefully
amazing.
I can come back. Maybe we can
Come
talk
on.
about the fighting Texas Aggies, but
Sequel.
not today. It's a little too soon after our loss last night.
Okay.
Sequel.
Yep, we'll do that anytime.
Yep.
Yeah,
You're
come on.
always welcome on the
Yeah,
podcast.
we showed you the guest room.
Yep,
Yes.
that's right. That's right.
So thank you to Adam.
All right. You want to give a shout out to Rustin before we go?
Yeah.
You better be listening to this.
Yeah, Rustin.
Yeah, Rustin. This is our test to see if you actually listen.
That's right.
But really, Rustin has been my right-hand man to really
Yeah.
push me to be better and go big.
Awesome. All right.
He's also the first person to call to get things done at times.
He's also the person in the room who's wearing this smashiest jacket.
That is true.
Yep. All right. All right. That's it.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today on Management Muse. We are a podcast / YouTube channel that we hope is entertaining and educational. If you are on YouTube, we would appreciate you subscribing and maybe leaving a comment and a like. If you are on any of the podcasts listening to this, we would appreciate stars, following, comments, all the good stuff. We want to say thank you to Christina, Sarah, and Rebecca, and then, of course, everybody at Design at Work. And then just as a last-minute reminder, we also want to mention that we are management and communication professionals working in the field, but also have degrees that back us in science. All that being said, we are talking in generalities on this podcast. We do not actually know your particular situation. So proceed with common sense and maybe a little bit of experimentation on your end. And we hope that you make the world a more beautiful place by making work a more enjoyable place. See you next time on Management Muse.